Welcome to Nashville Employer Stories. I'm Emily Bose with Transition Overwatch. We are connecting the military community with great places to live and work. And I'm so excited to be speaking today with Kyle Allen from Vaco. Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time today and talking to us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. For folks in the military community or in our audience that might not know, can you tell me just a little bit of your background?
Yeah,
What's your role at Vaco and how did you get there?
for sure. Yeah, I would say I think I've been in kind of this world I'll talk about for we're going on 20 years this year. Crazy to say. So my I transitioned into this world from accounting. So I was a
Mm,
former accountant. I worked for Ernst and Young and did the CPA track for a couple of years and realized I love the knowledge of it. Not sure it was really meant for me for a day to day career, and really
mm,
loved people, loved connecting, and wanted to really. I'm like, how do I get into sales? What do I do? And kind of fell into this business, which is, and I was working for a previous firm prior for 7 years, and then joined Vaco in 2012. And so, in a
okay.
nutshell, kind of who we are at Vaco. We're a talent solutions firm, specializing in accounting and finance. And IT, just to cut to the chase, but we find people
Okay.
jobs, we find people consulting opportunities, and then also we help clients sell strategic initiatives in accounting and finance and IT. So it's a mix of kind of staff aug, consulting,
Mm,
and some managed services offshore with some folks that are pushing things that way as well. So it's a mixed bag. So my day to day job is I oversee all the sales and delivery for the Vaco brand, which is the staffing talent solutions side of the business.
okay. Wow, it sounds like you've made your way into quite an interesting role.
Yeah,
Um, what would you say is something that really excites you? There's a lot going on in the talent space right now. There's a lot of stuff with AI. There's a lot going on, right?
yeah.
So, what would you say looking out at 2025? We're here kind of at the beginning of the year. What really excites you about what you see happening kind of in your industry or your company, where you guys are going with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think for us, obviously, I would say this has been a challenging couple of years in our industry. It's been a challenging couple of years
Mm,
for depending on kind of who you're talking to. It's been
yeah.
the employment market has been, I would say, kind of holding their breath a little bit in certain
Yep.
ways, and projects and what that is. And so, I think, but overall, we're seeing some trends that things are starting to pick up a bit. But I would say what I'm probably most excited about is just the ability to take the technology and where the technology is advancing with AI and automation and things like that and put it into our business, which we have done and we're looking to successfully do even more. And so I think our business is really relationship based, right? And so
Mm,
there is some things that we can automate and there's some AI functionality, but it's really, really challenging. You still have to have that kind of interaction, one-on-one kind of conversation at times to make deals happen and
right.
people kind of, making sure we're doing that. And so I think it's a balance of that.
Okay.
At least our individuals, folks that are helping, that are on the front lines, trying to drive business and find people jobs and fill consulting projects and all of that. Trying to get them working on the right things that kind of help to make their day more efficient is probably something that is pretty exciting, but also some people conceptually have a tough time to how does this work? What do you do? And so we're working
Mm,
through that. Because it's AI is only as good as kind of your data and your structure of your data allows it to
yeah,
be, right? So there's some
absolutely.
challenges there. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And it sounds like, help me kind of understand this a little bit. If I were someone who, saw some of the things you guys were doing at Vaco, I'm like, this seems like a really cool company. I'd be interested in working for them. Seems like there's a few ways that could go, even just within your particular brand, because you have internal teams like sales that you mentioned, but then you also have folks that you staff out to other companies that are probably
That's
more in the
right.
finance type roles. Am I thinking about that
You
correctly?
are correct. Yep, totally. So
Okay.
we probably have a total. We've got about 5,000 folks here domestically that work for us. We're $1 billion, 1.1 billion
Right.
in revenue. We probably have about 1,500 people internally that are kind of doing the thing, and then we have about, we'll call it 10,000 outside the walls of
Okay.
kind of interior between here, and then we got a big conglomerate in South America, India, Philippines, a lot of different areas on the
Right.
managed services side. So there's a lot of different ways to go out there. And so there's a lot of people, that accountants that come to us, or technology individuals that come to us, looking for jobs or looking to extend consulting projects, or maybe they even have a side consulting gig on their own, and it's filling about 5 to 10 hours a week, or the project's ebbs and flows. And so we can fill some gaps for
Okay.
them, if projects wind down with some clients, and sometimes they end up loving it and staying with us for a long time, or go on full time with their company that we put them at. So there's
Okay.
different angles that we can do. But I say, in a nutshell, all my kids are like, I don't know what my dad does. I find people jobs. We find people jobs, right? And sometimes it's
Right.
direct. We call it direct hire, or we put them there. Where in Nashville, HCA is a big client, where we'll put them in HCA
Right.
and they pay us a one-time fee, or a company, Community Health Systems, is a great partner with us, and like, hey, we got this big 6-month project. We need to ramp this up and do this on either accounting and finance and IT. And so we'll put a team of people out there to help them accomplish their goals, and then we'll move
Okay.
on to the next thing when that's finished. So
That
uh,
makes sense.
it varies.
Okay. So someone could potentially contract with you guys or do a variety of things on that side
Yep.
that are those accounting, finance, maybe data type professionals. But then you also have
Yep.
folks that are on your team that are, and probably internally they're doing HR functions or sales functions or some of those other things as
Yeah.
well.
So
Okay.
yeah. So we're a $1 billion organization headquartered in Nashville.
Great. Yeah.
So we have all the back office, as you would imagine. So we have our own accounting to worry about. We have our own
Right.
IT.
That
We've
makes
got
sense.
our own marketing, our own HR, and so all those functionalities you would think of in a big company is there. And then also, obviously, all the frontline folks that we have. What I call them is I always tell people, like, hey, they're like, how can you find me a job? I'm like, well, the good thing is I can. The bad thing is I don't create them. I'm a broker. I get
Right.
in the middle. I try to go find
Yep.
where the demand is, and I go find where the supply is, and put them together, right? And so on the sales, so we usually have different folks doing different things, but we have kind of
Yeah.
front facing people out with our clients, meeting the people out in the community that have the need. And then we'll have recruiters that are trying to find the talent to then broker the deal together. And so that's another piece of the business, which I oversee.
Okay.
They don't want me in the back office doing accounting anymore. Our CEO would kick me out fast. So
That's
um,
amazing.
I, I know what they're talking about. Doing it is a whole nother deal now these days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It seems like such a very specific set of skills that you need to be able to navigate all the different, regulations and things. It's
For sure.
definitely not my cup of tea either. Um, okay, so we talked about trends and kind of where things are going. I'd be interested to see, and you might have kind of touched on this with what you were saying about not creating the jobs per se. Like, what do you think is something people typically misunderstand about what you guys do or kind of how your industry works that you wish was better understood?
Well, I think that's one. I would say, for one, is we don't create the jobs, right? We have to have the demand there from the clients. But two, I will say, if we don't know who you are, we can't help you, right? And so
Mm,
a lot of people will come to us when the house is on fire, we'll call it, right? I need a job tomorrow. And so
right.
I think a really important thing to think about is just, hey, if you're in a really comfortable spot right now, or in your career, like, that's sometimes the best time to be looking for, or not even
Yeah.
looking, but just like networking with folks like us or other associations or just people in your industry. How are you kind of becoming best of breed in what you do, right? And so I
Mm,
always push people to, like, hey, how are you becoming better? How are you becoming an expert? And usually that involves surrounding yourself with people that maybe have been around a time or two a little bit longer, or know a little bit more. And so I would say those are the two things. One, if we don't know, we can't help the people we don't know, right?
right.
If you never, so a lot of people think, oh, if I call a recruiter, I got to be ready to take a job. Like, I've been in this business 20 years. I have talked to numerous people that I've, one, never placed, but two, it's been years, 3 or 4 years,
Right.
right?
Yep.
We just today, actually, I have an example of an individual I've known for over 20 years, never placed, friend of mine, worked with him, and now he was available to do some consulting work, and we just put him on an assignment today. So, like,
Oh, nice.
that's
Okay.
20 years. So, like,
Yeah.
talking to a recruiter is not a bad thing. I would just ping them for information. How's the market? What does it look like? Here's what I'm thinking through. Here's my pie in the sky of what I would love to have. I don't need
Mm,
anything. That's the best spot to be in, right? So finding a couple of
yep.
really solid recruiters you trust and can get and speak truth to you of what's going on in the market is one. And then two, I just wish everybody would understand, like, if we placed everybody we met, we wouldn't be in. I wouldn't need to work very often. Um, just being honest, right?
Yeah,
So it's for us, it's somewhat of a we're trying to meet as many people as we can to predict demand of where it's going to be,
of
right?
course.
And we know the skill sets we place, but we're not exactly sure what flavor is going to come our way. And so we're trying to meet as many people to be prepared. For the people we do help, they think we're miracle workers, and for the people that we don't, there's probably a less desire there of working with us in the
Right.
future. But hopefully, we're giving them the end result didn't work out, but hopefully, we're treating you along the way really well. We're educating you on interview tips, resume writing. Hey, think through this. We're prepping you pretty well. And also, too, you may have had some opportunities on your own. Like, we're getting visibility into so many corporations in town, right? We know culture, we know what they're looking for, we know,
Right.
hey, it says work life balance. Here's what that means at this organization, right? And so, if people, I've been told by our clients, I should just call you just for, dirt on other companies in town. I'm like, yeah, we know a lot, right? We don't come out and say
Yes.
it, but we know a
Yeah.
lot, because we're talking to employers, we're talking to clients, we're to people, candidates, individuals looking for jobs leave. They're like, don't go there. They made us do X, Y, and Z. You're like, wow. So
Yeah.
a good a good agency that believes in you and works you through it. And if you got to build the trust, this isn't going to come from one phone call, by the way.
Hmm.
These individuals that call me on some stuff I've been working with for 15 years, and I trust them and what I'm telling them, right? But it's a good way to build that network. And then also too, a lot of, and I know we do at Vaco, we have this more so on the IT side, is user groups. So we'll have different. I'm not a tech guy, so bear with me. But we'll have Azure to .NET or some PM type user groups, and so you meet peer like folks and meet folks like
Uh,
that, and so we'll bring people together, and also a lot of those different, whether it's executives or whether it's midline managers, they all struggle with a lot of the same things. And so, what'd y'all do for this? What'd you do there? And so we're trying to bring like-minded people together to help them get better at their job as well. So that's another great way to network
yeah,
around there as well.
absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed, because I'm connected with, I don't know if you know him, Charlie Epigian. He was on the show here a couple months
Okay.
ago, and he's a big data analyst
Yeah.
guy. He's a professor at one of the big universities, and he's involved in all the data analyst community. And I see him posting like, "Oh, or this data analytics meetup sponsored by Vaco," and
That's
I've
right.
seen your name come up over and over
Yeah.
as I'm seeing these different communities in Nashville that you guys are,
Our
super involved in trying to help make those happen, which is
Yeah,
great.
and I think listen, obviously, it's a selfish way for us to meet everybody, because this is what we need to do too, is we know it,
Right.
but we want you to do the same, right? And so it's
Yeah.
you'll meet some folks and potentially help them with projects, or then we can give some perspective of like, well, we did that, well, Vaco helped us do this and that, and you're like, wow, okay, your eyes just open, right? And if you don't, I always try to say this with like getting perspective, and kind of the seat you sit in is really important, right? Of kind of what's going on around you. Because if you have your blinders on all the time, you just do your thing every day, you're not growing, you're not learning, right? And so I tell my kids
Yeah.
all the time, like, growing and learning doesn't stop when you graduate college or graduate high school. Like, it just starts. And the people that are really inquisitive and trying to drive and read more and learn and listen and ask questions just naturally learn more, and they become more
Hmm.
aware of what's going on.
I think that's a great point. And I have been on the recruiting side myself, and I can't tell you how many employers look for that, where they're like, oh, we want a growth minded person in this role because
Yeah.
or those are the types of people we're trying to bring into the organization because we know we have these changes coming up or this or that. And we need people that are willing and able to learn and grow and expand. And, all companies, I think it's fair to say, want people that can be developed in the company into, future leadership, right? If they're smart. So they're
Totally. And
always looking for people that can grow and take on more responsibility.
I always say this to employers who are like, hey, we have these 8 things that we want in a job. We have to have these 8 things. I'm like, well, what are they going to, what are they getting out of this? Right. And
Yep.
so, I think it's important to grow in your career and have a longer runway. And if I could give anybody any advice, just be curious, right? And asking questions and the right questions, right?
Right.
When it makes sense. But I think that's one of those things that where you're just constantly trying to learn, trying to keep up, and making you better yourself is like as soon as you get complacent, like I know everything. I promise you, there's always something else, right? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, generative AI
Always.
comes out and, everything changes in
That's
everybody's
right.
industry.
That's right.
Um, what do you think if you could predict the future, which I know it's very difficult, as I just said, one thing comes out and it changes everything, right? But how do you see your industry evolving over the next few years? Like, what do you have any ideas of like what some of these things will look like in the next 5 to 10 years? Or are we all just kind of trying to keep up with the wave of technology and it'll be fun to see where it goes?
It'll be fun to see where it goes. I mean, I think there's a couple things where, you know, you're starting to see a lot more, a lot of knock on the agency side is, well, I applied and never heard back, or I called them and never heard back. And a lot of that just comes to manpower and what did your skill set fit exactly what they were looking for in that moment. We hopefully take a larger, broader view and be a little more proactive in that search, of like, hey, it doesn't fit this, but it could fit other things we may have.
Right.
But I do think as we work through AI, I think it's going to be interesting to see how much the market we give the market on the AI functionality and they accept and use. For instance, when you apply to a job, there's ways that we can do this to where we're screening you quickly to kind of see what your needs are, to then put you in a queue to then have it follow up, right? Or there's some prepping and automation we can do and tools or some push notifications we can push out for, hey, we got this job, we got this. And so is it a annoyance? Is it really well leaned into? There's a bunch of different levels you can go to, but
Right.
where that market is going to lean in and say, yes, this is great, I like it. Because anytime you're talking to kind of AI, or not AI, or just robotic type things, like I get
Right.
so annoyed on the telemarketing thing. But I'll tell you what, I used Amazon's AI return thing the other day. Now I just do it on the app or whatever. But if you have an issue and you talk to somebody, it was unbelievable.
It was
Like
amazing. I did that
it
recently
was it was unbelievable. And
too.
so I
Hmm.
think I think if you can get to that level to where it feels personable, you're not talking to a human, but there is some action following it, you're like, okay, I
Hmm.
can lean into that. And so that's going to take some time. Um,
And you could
but
get to a human if
yeah,
you really needed to,
that's
that
right.
was a
That's
nice
right.
element of it as well, is it's
Yep.
like, okay, I know this is a robot, I'm willing to go through that, but in an instance where I really do need a human, this isn't solving my problem, I can get there, that I think that balance really made a difference in that type of experience, you
Yeah.
know?
If I got a problem with my bill at one of my deal, I'm like, just give me give me zero, right? You're
Right.
not going to solve this. So, so I think there's that. But I do think it's going to be interesting with just some of the challenges are you can go on Chat GBT right now and write me a resume as a whatever, and having these I've been at these four jobs, and it's like,
Right.
okay, great. Did you really do that? Right. And so there's some
Yeah.
of that going on. There's some bait and switch things that happen, especially on the technology side. If somebody interviews for the job and a different person shows up, that becomes again, yeah, that happens. Um,
Wow.
and so, yeah. So there's some negative sides to it as well. Um,
Right.
but I think overall, I think it's good. I mean, I think can we get to more people? Can we get some more things automated? How we get to folks, the delivery. I mean, end of the day, what our clients want is a proven resource, right? So the more AI, the more that's out there that can help us get to that end result, the better, faster it
Yep.
is, right? Um, but as far as like I've heard things, oh, agencies are going to be totally gone. I don't think that's going to be the case because I've heard that twice in my 20 years. Just because it's really hard to get rid of the human element.
Yep.
Like you can automate a lot. You can't automate feelings and
Right.
concerns and listen, changing a job is a top 5 most stressful thing somebody does. Some people, depending on where it is, it would be 2 or 3. It's very emotional.
Mhm. It
You
is.
can't buy it's just challenging. And so I don't think you'll
Yep.
ever automate a marriage or a divorce. I don't know if you'll ever
Right.
automate children. There's some ways to fast track some of that,
Right,
right?
right.
You still gotta go do it. So having it, now transactionally on a real estate deal, you can do that a little more automated now, but that still takes some human effort, right?
Right.
So
And you may still want a person in that experience with you because it is so emotional, right? Like you were saying with the career side of things, it is an emotional experience. And I think the thing that I could see the danger of getting lost in a highly automated hiring practice is when you find that person that doesn't check every box but has a lot of potential. And as a recruiter or an agency, when you know the employer, like you were saying, okay, you've told me in other conversations
yeah,
that you're looking for this up and comer, and I know this isn't exactly what you want, but I think it will check these other boxes that we've been talking about for months that doesn't fit all the job description, but it's worth looking at. And I've placed people in companies before that were able to go into really cool growth, or they created positions for that didn't exist in the moment because they were the type of person that they needed. And I mean, maybe AI gets there, but I don't think that's going to be soon. And that's where, to kind of go back to your point on recruiters and that type of thing, building those relationships and networking becomes really important because, there are going to be recruiters that know those inside details that nobody else knows,
yeah, I know.
maybe even inside the company. Um, I've had pretty interesting conversations with CEOs that are like, "Don't tell anyone. Here's coming down the pipe in the next whatever, whatever, and here's what we're
Yeah,
gonna need." And you're like, "Well, okay,
for sure.
I'll keep my ears open." So that's where the human piece, I think, really will stick it out. And I'm curious to hear your thought on that because I think that is something that really sets us apart from the technology.
It is for sure, and that's why I think if like, is your job ever going to go away? And like, I think it continues to evolve. I don't think it ever
Right.
goes away. And what it is, we've seen some competitors come into the market and leave for various. They try to take a piece of, well, we're going to be this, we're going to be a low cost and automated, and you come in and just here's
Right.
you do all the work and it's $5,000 kind of stuff, and it's like there's a piece for everybody, I guess, from that standpoint. But I would just say the human elephant element
The
not
human elephant
elephant.
in the room.
That's right. The element of that is it's just really tough to automate, right? You
Right.
can't
Yeah.
people can try. I've tried to automate my feelings at times. It usually ends poorly. And so there's just a
Or
lot of
some
questions that come up.
strange conversations with ChatGPT, right?
That's right. That's right. But I think overall, I will tell you this is just like is what I think is just a quick side comment of just the human element. Like when we're talking about networking and growing and building these relationships, these don't happen in 2 weeks. Like this is a constant drip for somebody who's watching this and like, how do I build one conversation at a time and just being consistent with it? Like, how do I lose weight? Your first pound, right? Just take your first step and go do. And so I
Mm,
think people get caught up in this whole like, how do I build a network? How do I go this? Just put yourself out there. Just put yourself out there. Just go up there, have a conversation with 2 people you don't know, and there you go. You started. Like I think there's
mhm.
the fear of what does it got to be? What does it have to do? All this stuff. And so like
Yep.
just the human nature in you, like I always say this is like think less, do more, right?
Mm,
And I think that's super important with just like a career transition or a career trying to find something new or trying to build a network or whatever. And even if it's uncomfortable, then start with one conversation, right?
right.
So have
Yeah.
small obtainable goals to go make that human connection, whether it's finding a job, a network, or whatever. So
No,
that's
I
my
like that, and I wanted to dig into that a little bit more of what you said before, just about networking and that slow process. Because I'm thinking about, the military community encompasses a lot of folks, right? You
yeah
can have active duty military members that may be 2 years, a year, 6 months out from transition. Sometimes people know for a long time if they're retiring, they have
yeah
kind of a date. And the military, I feel like, is really unusual compared to most civilian type of things where you have a clear end date. in a civilian job, like you were saying before, you may go kind of passively job hunting while you're still employed, and then you
Yep.
create your end
That's
date,
right.
unless you're on a contract or something that's different. But in the military, you get a date, and that's it. That's your date. And so a lot of times, folks are doing that longer term planning, and then you have military spouses who go through a lot of those transitions as well. And then of course there's reservists and National Guards and some of those guys that have kind of a variety of different challenges that they're facing. But thinking about it from the perspective of someone who is getting ready to transition, let's say
Yep.
they're a year out, maybe they have a degree that would align with the type of things you guys would be doing. Um, how would you recommend that someone start thinking about that transition, or start thinking about building that network, especially if they're coming to a new area? Like, let's say, they're stationed in San Diego, but they want to move to Nashville. So they're
Yeah.
building their network kind of from scratch.
Yep.
What recommendations would you make as far as how they begin to start that process?
Well, first off, I would start with the mental aspect of it all, right? Because knowing, I would just say on the front end, it's going to be a challenge. Any big transition like this
Hmm.
is challenging. So I think understanding that on the front end and getting yourself mentally prepared for this is going to be hard, but we can do hard things is, I think, the first step in that, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, and that, anybody watching this in the military, you're underappreciated, way, way underappreciated in kind of the service and the sacrifice that you and your family have gone through. And so
Hmm.
I think maybe if you hear me say it, I'm the only person saying that, thank you, right?
Yes.
Is number
Agreed.
one. And hopefully you feel a little bit of sense of pride, I hope, in what you've done and be able to look back at what you've accomplished. Because I will say this, I know there's different areas of things. My second step would be, okay, what have I accomplished over the X number of
Mm,
years? Like, as you start to put together kind of, not even before your resume, but like, what have I done? How have I always say this of like, what have I achieved? What have I made? What have I saved? What have I accomplished? And so going through a list and just writing those down, right? What are the projects you worked on? And so I think that's important too, to make one, it's really fun to reflect, because I feel like there's so many times where people just look forward and they look forward into this dark hole and you're like, I don't know what's
mm,
certain. I'm not sure where I'm going. But if you look backwards, you're like, wow, I know what happened there. I lived it, right? And there may have been some bumps in the road, and maybe some things that
right.
are, some things we need to work on, or grow from. But also, I'm sure there's some accomplishments that you can pull forward with you. And
Right.
so, whether it's going to be leadership, or maybe it's you're more hands on with different things. So I think getting that list together, and then helping that from there craft a resume, right? Of some accomplishments is before you kind of go out there. Because I think the first thing that happens, and just it puts pressure on you, as you come and talk to me and you're like, okay, you got a resume? What have you done? Where you been? You're like, I don't know, I'm just
Right.
thinking through it, right? And so I think doing
Yeah.
some of the thinking on your own, and reflecting and acknowledgement, and getting your right headspace, because I think that's the biggest important thing for interviewing, because people have a lot of negative self-talk in their head. They really, really
Hmm.
do. And so
Yeah.
whatever exercises you can do, it's breathing exercises. Or Mel Robbins is a big one with anxiety, and she listens and says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going. Here we go. We're being
Mm,
positive. And so working on just that, as far as just having conversations, because I think everybody's like, I got to be perfect. I got to get every interview right. I'm like, you only need one. I'm pretty sure you can only get one job. So
right.
you really only need one to go well, if we're being honest.
Yes.
Um, so I take that pressure off of just this anxiety ridden, like, "Ugh,"
Mm,
and start talking to yourself in a way that's like, you've got this, you can do this. How are you going to do it? I don't know. We're going to figure it out. Let's get down. Let's write some things down, right? Let's have one conversation with Kyle Allen today.
mm,
And also know, and I would say this, is so you get your resume together and your accomplishments to a resume. And that resume can also, you don't need one perfect resume. That resume you may have, by the end of this, you may have 15. Now you got to keep up with who you're sending them to. But if you're talking to
right.
me and I have an opportunity, like, oh, I've done that. I've done this, and I can help. Let me change my resume for Kyle, that this, and then you have some kind of code on your resume, and that you save it as, this one went to me. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so I think through conversations that you have and through questions that people ask you about your background will help you craft your resume even more, right? And so you're like, "Oh, I didn't think
Right.
about that. Yeah, I've done that, or I haven't done that." And
Yeah,
so
and it
and then
can be a
from
living document in that sense.
that's
It's
right.
not
Yeah.
static, like, "Oh, you made it
No,
once and now you can't change it," but
that's
or
right.
you got it written by someone that was a professional that knows better than you know, what they're doing. I think
That's
that's
right.
something that a lot of people get stuck in is it's like, this is the professionally made
No.
one. I can't change it," you know? So,
No.
I think
Yeah, and
understanding,
then
like you said, you can refine it as you go along or refine versions is really important.
yeah. But I think too with the resume, just like in talking that for a second, like having it action oriented, where like, okay, I did
Mhm.
this resulting in what, right? We
Yep.
made this, which led to this, right? And so I think thinking of that, and anytime you can put numbers or percentages on your resume is a really big win because it just the eye goes to numbers. Like just it's
Mm.
if you like, hey Kyle, find the word because in a resume. I'm like, find the number 12. I can find 12 a lot faster than a word on a resume. And so just the eyes
Right.
because it breaks up the resume a bit. And so that's something to think through too. But I
Great
think
point. And
once you those are the first two or three key things to have, and then continue the positive self talk continuously because
mhm.
it can be. And I transitioned, like Kyle, you didn't come from military. I'm like, well, I went from being an accountant to a sales guy, right,
Right.
or wanting to be
Pretty
a
big
sales guy,
change,
and like that's a
right?
huge change. And so it took me. I had to change jobs to take something I didn't really want to get where I wanted to go. And so that was probably an 18-month process, you know?
Mhm.
So it's be patient with it and hopefully you'll have enough headwind. And also too, there's no shame in doing an interim job while you're trying to find what you want. Go be a
Mm.
bartender, go drive Uber, go whatever. Just get some side cash. And I would just say, like, there's no pride in this. Whatever you got to
Mhm.
do for your family to provide is what you need to go do. Right. And
Mhm.
so, and especially like, I'm always fine if somebody's like, well, I'm doing this now to get to this. I'm like, love it. I don't care what it is, you know?
Right.
And so they're like, there's always a plan and where I'm going, or I'm working for this individual for free to learn, and I can, or for minimal, whatever, to I want to learn what he does or she does because this
Yeah.
is where I want to
Yes.
be. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
great. Like there's always like go offer yourself up for a week to go whatever. Go because I think
Shadow
people a lot
someone or
go shadow someone. Like so I think people are like, get creative. Like you are the one coming and wanting to do this. Like make it easy on the person you're asking to do
mhm.
that. Right.
Say yes.
Um, yeah, totally. And so I think that's really, really important as well. Is like, hey, you want this, as I say all the time, go figure it out. And if you can't figure it out on your own, go find somebody, go get a friend. Here's what I'm trying to do. What do you think? And they
Mm.
can walk you through. Because I know some people, as my wife has told me, don't have that gene as well as I maybe do. And but going getting some wise counsel, right,
Yes.
or talking to the people that can help you through that to at least start the conversation once you kind of have your thoughts together, and it also like don't set your expectations too high on any conversation because if I was
Right.
looking for, I'm like, just have a lunch, no expectations, because the reality is you put too many expectations on it, you're going to walk away and be like, didn't find a job, he didn't have anything for me, didn't get a
Yeah.
referral, he didn't introduce me to somebody. So like just have a conversation, be professional.
Mhm.
This is where I'm going, and have your thoughts concise. The worst thing you can do is be like, just need a job, don't know what I'm doing, I'm kind of lost,
Mhm.
I'm in transition. That's the worst you can show up to somebody is you don't have
Right.
a clear plan of what you want to be, where you want to go. Because if you come to me and say, "Hey, I want to get into construction and I want to be a project manager. I have some background in that. You gave me some relevant experience you've had in the past in the military." I'm like, "Well, I know 3 owners right now I can put you in touch with to have a conversation with." So I'm just saying, when you come to somebody, like,
Mhm.
give them a lane, right? They can stay in, because if you don't, then they're gonna be like, "Well, I could just anything, Kyle." I'm like, "Anything?" I mean, I know a lot of people, like, anything? Like,
Right.
that could be nothing, right? And
Yeah.
so give them that direct thought process there of kind of where you're wanting to go and where you're aspiring to be.
I think that's a great piece of advice, and it's interesting because I was speaking with someone earlier in the week who has had a very successful transition, and he went from kind of a logistics role in the military to actually a sales account manager type of role
Yeah,
outside, which was not what he was originally looking for, but ended up giving him, a great salary, super stable job, the location that he wanted, all the things that he wanted. And he was open, he was open to an opportunity. And his biggest piece of advice was, be open to things that you may not otherwise have thought of, but also know the things that you need, right? And so, like you're saying, I think sometimes it's hard for people to know what the specific job title might be that they're aiming for, but maybe the industry and the type of work that you want to do, whether it's you're like, I think maybe project management or operations management, because these are my skills, like narrow it down as much as you can and give people something to work with. I think that's a
for
really
sure.
great piece of advice.
It
Uh, Go ahead.
One other piece I'll give you, if you're trying to be connected or trying to find somebody who does what you do, I would say, Emily, exactly how you and I got connected was through LinkedIn. And you're like,
Hmm.
hey, here is what I'm trying to do. I respect what you're doing online. I feel like you could give some valuable insight. Will you come on my podcast and speak with me? I'm like, we've never met before LinkedIn. I'm like, sure.
Right.
So, so I would say if all our listeners here are not active on LinkedIn, like that is a really easy way to get
Yeah.
connected to really anybody you want to talk to. It's crazy. And so now, do I answer everybody? I'm getting sold to a lot on LinkedIn, so there's a lot of crappy sales
Right.
pitches. But if somebody's like, "Hey, I'm in my career, I'm transitioning, et cetera, et cetera," would you be open to a 15-minute conversation where I could just pick your brain and get some direction from you? I really respect you for what I see online, and I really appreciate the time. New grads and people in transition need to wear that out.
Yeah.
I probably have two or three phone calls. I have one today with a college, well, not a college graduate, a kid in college, and I'll talk to anybody towards the end of the day and help them out and give them some direction. So that's
Right.
something as well that I think is undervalued and way underused by individuals. I think they're just like, I don't want to bug them. I don't want to hit. I don't want to. I'm scared. I'm like, I will. People want to naturally help other people, right?
Yes.
I probably have that a little bit more in my DNA than others. But if people are legit asking, um, and most majority of people will help.
Yes, and I think that's a great point, and also maybe going I think a lot of times, connecting in with recruiters specifically, though I don't wanna go against what you said earlier about building relationships over time with recruiters, because I think that's exactly right, but if you are going to a recruiter that, uh, has the job out that you want and you're trying to get a 15-minute coffee with them and they're dealing with 5 to 800 applicants on that one job, that might be, you can try it, but that might be a little more difficult, but maybe go to the hiring manager or the VP or another veteran in the organization or someone else internally that you can connect with and get a little bit more of that feedback from, or maybe an internal referral from, because I know sometimes I hear frustration from people that they're like, well, I reached out to the recruiter one time and I never heard back. And it's like, you have to understand they're dealing with hundreds, maybe thousands of
So many reach
people, right?
outs.
And
Yeah,
so it's not that they don't want to connect or help. And that's where maybe, connecting more passively in a longer term game with some of those folks can be helpful. But reaching to other levels of the organization and knowing that you can do that, like you said, that mindset to go, maybe push
totally.
aside some of the imposter syndrome that I know can be really challenging at transition, and just ask. The worst they say is
That
no.
goes Yeah, and that goes back to kind of getting your mental game right and building yourself up. But I would say this, and hear me say this: the only way to find a job, I'd love to tell you, it's you got to work with Vaco. We're the only show in town, and you have to use a staffing agency. The reality is, over
Right.
50% of the time, you find a job through your network, right? Now, some of it's through us, and we can supplement that. But I think it's important to do both. It's important to build a relationship with a couple of
Yes.
recruiters in town. It's important to kind of have your network, which we talked about in your community, reaching out on LinkedIn and just slowly building that. I mean, I always say, how do you build a best friend, or how do you build a really a really
Mm,
trusted, confident contact? One conversation at a time.
yes.
You got to have it. Hey, you got to have the first one. right? And so it
Yeah.
just takes time. I always say this like to my people, like when they're talking to, I'm like, how do you build a best friend? Well, you don't build it. It just, you work on it, right? And you spend a lot of time together and you have some experiences. And so I'm not saying you got to have a best friend through this, but like, how do you start that process where it's trusted
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, it's Jim, or oh, it's Kyle or Emily, right? You just get to know each other. And so that's, I think
Mhm.
people really think about careers and networking as this like really really hard and in a box. I can't be myself, and I'm like,
Mhm.
just go be yourself. Just act like your best friend's across there. Like, how would you act with your best friend? You're like, well, I know her. I'm like, well, then go get to know this person, right? Just, I think people
Yeah.
just really, the hard part with networking is people get in their head about this. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it boils down to. I mean, there's some other things. I mean, I'm not competent, and I'm not whatever, whatever.
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
just ask questions. You'll learn.
Yes.
Like, it's like, I don't know. I don't know a lot about IT over the years. I've just asked enough questions, and I know enough to be dangerous now. And
And be
same with the,
interested in other people, right? Ask them
that's
questions
right.
about themselves or things that you
Yeah.
think they're interested in, or give them a compliment, or talk about the weather.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
always something you
So
can find to make that connection with someone.
totally. So I think that's, if I could just hit on that again, is just like,
Yeah.
just really monitoring kind of your your mental capacity and just where you are
Mhm.
from a mental standpoint through this whole thing. Like, if I could get, if anybody heard anything of this, like positive self-talk and like building yourself up is like way undervalued. And it's like the biggest, like, I think it's the biggest hurdle people
Mm.
have from having really genuine success and belief in themselves. And so the more you can talk yourself up and all of that. But you look at like athletes like Michael Phelps and other people that have struggled with this and how they cope,
Mm.
um, this imposter syndrome, and then I was this and now I'm not. I think there's a lot of that coming from the military community now. Like,
Yeah.
I feel confident, I have my space, and now who am I? I think that
Mhm.
you really got to deal with that. And I think there's some pride in where you came from, and some, yeah, I did some great things, and being able to articulate that to a civilian level job. Right? There's going to be some interpretation of things for me to understand what you do there. Because a lot of times I've talked to a handful of people, I'm like, oh, what's just this? Or like, what's that? I'm like, that. They're like,
Mm.
oh, well, I guess so. So I think the more you can also take, and listen, this is something Chat GBT can help with too, right?
That's
Of
true.
like putting in some military type terms and, hey, making this, how does this sound like a more of a civilian type job or corporate America? How does this translate to corporate America? So
That's the point.
yeah, for sure.
I love that. Keeping your mindset right and, having the fortitude to then stay in that place through the ups and downs of transition in the job market, I think is important. And I think a lot of folks in the military have learned how to do that because you have to be resilient to go through a lot of hard things to be in the military. But it's just
Totally.
not
You're
always
prepared.
easy. Yeah, you've got the skill set. It's just not always easy to do it in your own life. Like I can keep my work inbox on zero. It's literally on zero right now. And my personal inbox has like 10,000 unread messages. So it's like sometimes it's easier to do things for someone else than it is to do it for yourself. So
Understand.
keeping that skill set up while you transition is huge. Real quick to end, I would love to ask you why Nashville? Like, if someone is considering moving to the Nashville area, why would you recommend that someone think about putting some roots down there?
Emily, we've had so many people move here recently. I may tell you,
Half the
like,
people I
don't,
talk to are like, "Don't
no more. We're done. We're done. No.
come."
Here's what I would say is like, there's um a decent amount of influx. There's just a lot of different industries that have influxed into the market in the past 4 to, we'll call it 6, 7 years. A big, influx from financial services, AB, and a few other, Alliance Bernstein, and a few others. It was predominantly a healthcare town. It still is. Fun fact: 90% of all for-profit healthcare hospital beds are owned in Nashville. And so there's a lot of other healthcare services that sell to
Right,
those
like
big companies here
adjacent.
too.
Mhm.
Healthcare IT, that's right. And so obviously HCA is the big player
Yeah.
in town, but they're great for the community. And I think they're fantastic for Nashville, obviously. But I would say just overall, you know, the traffic is decent, right? There's a lot of spots you can go and have a yard and build a house. Real estate's getting more expensive for sure, so it's becoming more challenging. But I would just say there's a lot to do. A lot of hobbies are all here. The weather is usually pretty fantastic. It's like 70 degrees today. It's February 2nd. Is it third? No, third.
Third.
I was playing golf yesterday for 9 holes. It was awesome.
That's
We'll
amazing.
we'll have 2 or 3 days of a snowfall. Um, but so the weather's fantastic. I mean, if you want to really talk like brass tack, the tax structure we have in Tennessee and Nashville is pretty nice as well,
Yeah.
comparative to some other states that I know. Um, and then you have a mixed bag, I think, of the universities. And there's some homegrown folks here, some great high schools. I mean, I grew up in Murfreesboro, which is about an hour,
Oh,
45
okay.
minutes south of Nashville. That place, you want to talk about a growing community. It was 35,000 people when I moved there in the early 90s, and it is not that today. 100 and something,
Oh, wow.
120, 130. So it's grown mightily, and there's a lot of cities like that. There's a lot of land out here to kind of help them expand and sprawl. Um, so yeah, come on. There's a lot of good opportunities, a lot of fast growing companies doing that. I would say it's being infiltrated on the
Awesome.
technology side as well. So that's always a good niche for us, and
Mhm.
professionally, but also the individuals that are wanting to learn a little bit more as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time again to speak with us. I feel like you provided a lot of really valuable insight, and I know it'll be beneficial for anybody that watches it. So thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Awesome, glad to do it.